G'day everyone and welcome. You're listening to The Unaffected, the podcast that shares the stories of those affected by a loved one's disability, illness or condition. We are brought to you by CareMatch Australia. Check them out on Instagram or Facebook at carematch_Australia for all your caring needs. My name is Nick and with me as always is Jack. So g'day Jack.
Hello Nick. Bit of a different one today guys. Rounding out November. Is today the last day?
Last day today, yep.
November. Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. So today is going to be me and Nick sharing some stories about our experiences with mental health, both our own and people around us, and the effect that ours may have had on others at times. And we think it's a very important one to talk about because in an age of equality, suicide remains the leading cause of death for males aged 15 to 44. So that's pretty startling. It's about double the rate of blokes who die in car crashes.
Pretty confronting thing to talk about too. We've been talking about it before we came on here, saying it's going to be different, but we think it's so important to try to spread the message, especially for men, that it is so important to speak up if you are struggling, because still so many don't do it. And we think that if we come out and do it, even though we don't feel comfortable, then hopefully it'll help others that may be second guessing whether they do it or not, that they gives them that encouragement to go do it. So let's hope so.
Definitely a bit more of a confronting one. I don't really enjoy being the center of attention and talking about myself. I've always tried to be, well, not always actually, but in my later years I've tried to be quite open with people that I have experienced mental health issues and depression and anxiety, just to try and remove that stigma. But I don't think I've ever really opened up in depth about it before to many outside of my inner circle. So doing it to a wider audience is a bit confronting. Little disclaimer, I do tend to use humour and make jokes when I'm feeling awkward in situations. So if I make any inappropriate jokes about myself or any of the situations I've been in, I apologise in advance. But that's just one of the ways I deal with it.
See how it comes across. Hopefully we'll.
Yeah. Well, I think my story might be pretty extensive, so it might be best to start with yours, mate. Tell us about what experiences have you had with mental health?
Yeah, so I think I've been pretty lucky in my life. I don't think I've had I've definitely had no times where I've been feeling absolute rock bottom or anything like that. For whatever reason it is, that I think I've been pretty lucky. I think a lot of the mental health things, in hindsight, I've been able to look back on and say, that was a time when I was struggling with mental health. I don't think there's been that many times until recently that it's probably just some more education and now it's more spoken about a little bit more, that I've actually stopped in the moment and thought, this is something that is happening. But it wasn't until, I think even until we spoke about doing this episode, that a few things I've looked back on and thought, that was a time when I was, struggling, or just there was something going on and I just didn't really know what it was. So I guess thinking back, the earliest one I could think of was probably back when I was really young. It wasn't anything, I guess, too significant, you'd say, but I was a really overweight child, and there was times when I remember growing up, I'd look at myself in the mirror or getting into the shower, whatever it was, and just hated the way I looked, and I just would get so angry with myself and just hated it. But obviously, at that age, I didn't do anything about it, didn't change it, didn't really know eating habits and all that stuff, but it just got me so down. And those times when you'd be at friends' birthday parties, whatever it might be, everyone's got their shirts off and you don't want to take yours off. And it's just something I was so young. And at the time I didn't realize the effect it was really having on me. I was just like, I'm upset because I'm fat kind of thing. And looking back now, I realize that was probably a really early thing that started something for me in my later years, where on our last episode we spoke about that just about only after speaking with Zoe and realizing some of the habits she had, I went, oh God, I think I had somewhat of an eating disorder.
I think we both did. I
know. And thinking back now, that's probably where it started from, stuff like that, because that was also when I got to my later years, when I did, got into sport and water polo and trained a lot and lost that weight, and got to a stage where I was still I was skinny. I was too skinny. I had a stage where people told me I was too skinny, but looking at myself, I still would find those little bits wrong and hate myself for it, and just that body dysmorphia almost just not realizing, and those things I really struggled with until like I said, I don't think it was ever a thing that really got me to rock bottom or anything like that. It was just those little things that were in the moments, and it, like, for whatever reason, it never hung around for too long, but that was always something in the back of my mind until, I don't know, maybe I just got a bit older and realized, get over it, like, it doesn't matter what you look like, sort of thing. But I think that's probably where the first earliest ones I can remember. But after that, I guess, had my accident, and that
life-changing
life-changing event.
Understandable for anyone that has experienced mental health issues following such a big life change or changing quality of life.
Yeah, so even with that, I don't remember having anything like too crazy, but like in the moment, or like following the days after, I've always spoken about the support I had around me with my family and friends, or I helped like heaps. But I had a moment where I remember I was going through ICU, and I was in hospital before I went to rehab, and I had couldn't move at all. I could move my head, and that was it. I had no movement in my arms or legs. And I just remember thinking, it'll be right. Once I get to rehab, I'll start exercising. I'll get better. Once I can exercise, I'll put strength on, just same as anything else, and I'll get better, and I'll get all this movement back. It'll be sweet. And I got to rehab, and I probably spent about 2 weeks there doing a bit of physio and stuff, and nothing really changed. It was probably a bit longer, probably about 4 weeks there. Nothing had changed. And that's when I had this real moment where I was like, yeah, this isn't happening the way I thought it was going to happen, and I might really be in trouble here. And it just, I think it just hit me one day, and I was just down, just upset about the whole thing. And I think the thing that helped was Mum was there, like, by my side the whole time through rehab, and just having her there, being able to talk things through, and just be normal. I don't know. I don't really know. I don't remember doing anything in particular that fixed it or anything, but that was a moment that I was really just like, oh shit, this is really hit me. I was just down.
When you say a moment, like, how long are we talking?
Oh, I don't know. It was just like, I think it was maybe a couple of days.
Yeah.
A couple of days, but it wasn't like 24/7 it wasn't for like the whole day those days. It was just like moments, and something would happen. I'd be in a conversation with someone and we'd be having a joke, and in that moment, like, you'd forget about it, but then you'd go up and you'd be on your own again, and it just comes back into your mind, and just little things you're reminded about, that, like, you might go past a mirror or whatever it might be, or you might want to go do something you can't do, and it just reminded about it, and that's when it just plays back down, and that all of a sudden that happy conversation you had 5 minutes ago seems like a lifetime ago, and it's not there anymore. But I don't think throughout, there's always moments throughout, since my injury, there still is, like, there'll be a 30-minute moment one day, there'll be a 2-hour period another day, there might be a 10-second period another day, that just things fucking suck. And they obviously do, like, they do, but the majority of the time I'm a real happy bloke, like, I'm fine, but there is just always those moments that creep in, and it's important to recognize those moments and say, this is okay that this is happening, and like, you deal with it and let yourself be down for how long you need, and you do whatever you need to do to move on from there, and then you progress on.
Okay, maybe not depression, but what about anxiety? Did you ever experience anything that you might label as anxiety?
I did, actually. I'd never experienced anything like that growing up or before my accident. I was always a very social person. And then it wasn't until after my accident that there was some things I'd go to where, especially around in Albury, where sometimes you'd know people, and I knew them before my accident. And so then going back afterwards and seeing them hanging out with them, not necessarily my close mates, because I knew, like, I had great close mates and they just treated you the same, and it was fine. But some of those other people, the wider community, you'd go and you'd think people are almost looking at you, feeling sorry for you, and just don't know how to act. And obviously you go from being someone standing taller than everyone else and then obviously sitting down needing help to do every little thing you need to do. So it's almost, around those people you already knew, it was almost just like embarrassment being around them. And I got that anxiety before going to social things, and then moving up to Queensland, and sometimes at the start going to meet new people, that anxiety of just, I don't want to go. I'd start thinking making up all these scenarios in my head, or what if this happens, what if that happens, like, and just freaking out before anything had happened, just assuming the worst. And it was something so weird that I didn't know what was happening or what it was, and it wasn't, and yet until hindsight, looking back on it, that I'm like, I was getting anxious about that moment. And I think it's something that, as my situation changed a little bit in terms of out of a relationship and having carers with me and that sort of thing, that it made it a bit easier, and I got a bit more comfortable in the way I was living in myself, and a bit more confident, and just adjusted to it. But yeah, in that moment, it was something so strange. I didn't know what it was or how to deal with it. But I also had a moment in the relationship that it was just us two living together, and we're obviously spending a lot of time together because I need a lot of help. So she sort of said, I need a bit of time to myself. So she'd go away for a little bit, and I'd be at home. So actually I had everything I needed before she went. And that was all fine. And then I found myself, I was just sitting in the apartment, and I was watching TV, and I couldn't do anything. I was such an active person before my accident. I was always okay being with myself, and I'd be happy to go to the gym by myself, go down the street, do whatever by myself, because you could do things yourself. But when you can't, I found myself just sitting there. I was just watching TV on my own, and it was just such a strange feeling that I didn't know what it was or what was happening. And I was getting so angry, but then upset, but then didn't know what I was angry or upset at. And it was just the situation, and it was all building. And I remember one day I was just sitting there, and I was just broke down, started crying, and just like screaming because I didn't know how to deal with it, and I couldn't let it out. I couldn't go to the gym and lift weights or anything. I couldn't go for a run. I couldn't go for a swim. And I just had to sit there and stew in it. And that was something there that, looking back, that's probably how I used to deal with it. When I'd get angry or frustrated or anything, I'd go do something physical, and all of a sudden I couldn't. I had to find new ways of dealing with it. So I sat there and I just did not know what was happening, and it just built up and just got too much for me, and I let it out. And then after I let it out, it felt so much better just to let it out and to deal with it and say that sucked, that moment sucked. And it didn't last forever. It just lasted for that little bit. And once you let it out and you deal with it, and I talk through it with people, and then it was better. But then after that, I sort of realized that next time that I got frustrated or angry or overwhelmed or whatever it might be, that I needed something to let it out. So now I, again, try to keep busy, whether it's doing this podcast stuff or do something with Luna, the dog, or whatever it might be, just to try to find something to do. But yeah, it was a weird situation.
Looking back, do you think that you might have recognised certain times where you'd be feeling these thoughts coming in, and you just quickly shut them down or put them away somewhere under the surface?
100%. I think I just feel them coming, and I'm just like, oh no, don't worry about it. Push it down. I don't really know how I deal with it or how I push it away, but I do. And then I just tell myself, it'll be better soon. Just write it out and you'll be right. And again, lucky enough, I am someone that it is okay. Whether if it lasts the whole day, I wake up the next day, and 9 times out of 10, the next day I wake up and I'm better. Hopefully had a good sleep and get a good bit of food, and I'm right, ready to go again. But yeah, it's something that definitely, as they came, I just push them down. Like I said, I'd just try to distract myself, the exercise or whatever it might be. But then when those things get taken away, you didn't know how to deal with it. You're almost learning how to live a new life just about. So that definitely crept up on me, and just didn't see it coming.
Are there any techniques you use these days, now that you don't have exercise and things like that, to as a functional distraction, I suppose we'll call it?
I'm definitely more open with talking to people now when it might be something just a little bit shit. It just might be talking it through. It might be just going and hanging out with a mate. Don't necessarily need to talk about anything, but just seeing someone having a coffee, or even just going for a coffee, or getting out in the sunshine, or taking Luna for a walk, getting outside, trying to do something is massive for me. If I'm sitting inside the whole time feeling like I'm doing nothing, feeling like I'm not being productive, then that'll put me from a good mood to a shit mood sometimes. And that's just the way I brought up. Dad's always outside doing something, and forever sitting in front of the TV. He's like, fucking get outside. What are you doing? So, and like I said, I was a very, very active person with like sport and following that and working all day and then go to the gym after, then training. So to have all that taken away was just such a shock to the system. And when I got home from rehab and I got back to Albury, and it was just, I was sitting there, all my mates were working, and I was sitting there just doing nothing, just watching TV. I tried studying, I couldn't do that. I just, felt like I had nothing, nothing to work towards or anything. And it's not like I felt like I had nothing, like I didn't want to be here anymore. I was still fine. But it just stewed in my head that like, what am I doing? And that's a big reason why I moved up to Queensland, is to get that little bit more. But definitely had to learn a lot along the way. And one of the best bits of advice I was given was to let yourself have the bad days, because without it, you can't have the good days. So just to let myself in those bad moments go, this sucks. It's all right. It's a loud suck for a little bit, but deal with it. Get up the next day and get stuck back in, and get back into it.
Absolutely. I think I thrive on progress. So even if for 23 hours and 59 minutes today I felt shit, if tomorrow that's 23 hours and 58 minutes, then that's progress, and that's enough for me to take confidence from better days are ahead and coming. And as I'll mention soon, I promise you all the tough times so far have passed, and every day you wake up is another opportunity to create magic and enjoy this opportunity. So never give up that hope.
I think an ironic thing for me as well is that this podcast has helped me a lot, in the fact that we've had a lot of messages and people saying that, it's helped them and they're glad with the message we're spreading. And I think doing this, giving me something to work on and work to, and feel like being a productive member of society essentially, and helping people and doing that has helped me a lot.
What about following your injury, people around you? Have you seen any mental health battles in those around you? Yeah,
I definitely see it in your friends and family, just the way it's tough, because in myself I can deal with it and I can know that I'm okay, but from them looking out, whether they probably don't think I'm okay, that they probably think, he's probably struggling more than he's letting on, and they worry, and then I see them worrying, and then I get upset because I know that my accidents cause them to worry about me. It's just like that ripple effect and going back and forth, and you definitely see it as you would, like as a parent. I mean, you're a parent. Imagine if, you don't want to imagine, but if something happened to Remy, the way it would affect you, I'm assuming as if it was yourself, it would absolutely kill you. So to see my parents, the way I see it affect them and my brothers and my friends, and some of them I've spoken about it with, some of them I haven't. But I imagine if it was one of my brothers or whatever it would be, that it would absolutely kill me. And someone said to me once, if you could swap positions with someone in your family, would you? I thought, no, you couldn't. Like, imagine seeing if I was one of my brothers, seeing them in the situation, that it would kill you as much as if it was yourself. So I can only imagine what they're going through on the outside looking in.
Yeah, absolutely. What about, not kind of in response to your injury, but have you seen any of your mates, being November, we'll talk about your guy mates, have you seen any of them deal with mental health issues?
Yeah, none come to mind of like real close mates that have actually openly spoken to me about how they've dealt with it. But I did have a mate I played water polo with in Sydney for a few years, and woke up one day and saw that he'd killed himself. And it was just, I hadn't spoken to him for a couple of years, but just still that shock. The guy I used to go to training with every day, used to speak to him every day. He was such a happy bloke, and to wake up to that news and just not realise that old Danos the Insanos had taken his own life was just, it was crazy. And that was probably the one that's been the closest to me. I've had good friends, one of her siblings took his life. Many people I know, not necessarily close with, but many people I know taken their life. And it's just something growing up, you never thought it was that common, but to get to that stage, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I come from a small town just south of the Queensland border called Ballina, and man, we had a shocking run. So there's a big headland there called Lennox Point, and we had maybe a 5-year period where that was just almost monthly. You'd hear about young people taking their lives by throwing themselves off Lennox Point. And it got to the stage where it's awesome now. There's so many really good initiatives down there. There's a bunch of young surfers down there that just held an event which they hold every year called the Morning of the Mo. And that started just as a little way in November to help raise awareness amongst the community down there, because it was still very untalked about. And a heap of the young guys from Lennox who have lost a couple of friends to suicide have started up some really good little community groups down there, like where all the young guys get together a morning and they try and grab heaps of the grommets coming up through the ranks, and they do little morning meditations and just chats, and they're doing such good things to remove the stigma. But I think the biggest thing to remember, and your story highlights that really well, is how indiscriminate depression and anxiety can be. So you're sitting there with a spinal cord injury, a lot more reason than most to feel down and out, and you're pretty stoic in it all. I've always wondered, there's people who you never know how well they're dealing with things internally, just because I know how well I can put a poker face on my bad days. But yeah, that's really amazing, and the resilience that a lot of individuals like yourself have shown through accidents and disability amazes me. And I think it can add to a bit of guilt when people don't have a lot of these things to be sad about, and it's just that the bloody black dog creeps up on them, which...
That's the thing too, because from the outside looking in, a lot of people would sit us next to each other, right? And they go, yep, Nick, you're sad, Jack, you're happy. That's, and it's weird. It's weird, and that's why you can't ever assume about anyone, and that's why no one should ever feel guilty about speaking up if you're not in a typically worse situation than someone next to you. That it doesn't matter. That like you said, that mental health doesn't discriminate, and it'll get anyone.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not always in response to events or experiences. Sometimes people are just unfortunately born with a bloody biological trigger waiting to go off in their head, and unfortunately that's what mine was. It's just I hit a certain age and my chemistry started working against me. But I think before we get involved, just remembering that this is probably going to be pretty confronting for a lot of people. Beyond Blue have offered their support, so reach out to them. We'll throw out their details at the end, as we always do. But yeah, as Nick said, it's not weak to speak. We're in a day and age where it's talked about enough that you know that if you're in a room, 50% of people have probably experienced mental health issues in that year. It's so prevalent, especially with all these new anxieties and pressures in life. So never suffer alone. Unfortunately, that's why men are so much more likely to take their lives, because as awesome progress as we're making in removing the stigma, there's still that toxic masculinity remaining from the previous generations, where the men were seen as the stalwarts of families and it was weak and they had to be strong and put on a brave face. But those days are gone. So no matter who you are, male, female, whatever, like if you're having a tough time, make sure you reach out to someone, and make sure it's someone reliable. If you don't have someone around you to talk to that you don't think can offer you the support you need, there's so many good hotlines out there now, and with all the information readily available on the internet, please find someone to talk to. Oh, here we go. Where do I start? All right. So I suppose I grew up in a family where my dad was a very traditional man. He worked hard, worked long hours, and was a man of few words at home. I don't think he had ever experienced much, and he was definitely the kind of guy who is as a kid, if you're feeling sad or you're upset, he was just like, what are you being a sook about? Like, come on. Mum overcompensated. Mum's the emotional one. She's experienced a lot of mental health issues herself, as I've learnt in my later life. So I think there's probably a genetic link there. And then on top of that, I grew up with a sister with cystic fibrosis, which mum and dad did a good job of sheltering me from the severity of that. But I grew up watching mum battle with mental health, because when Carly was born, that average life expectancy of CF was 18. So that's gone kind of a year in advance each year that she's been alive. But I grew up kind of being brought up just inherently. Somehow mum and dad had instilled in me that I wasn't going to have Carly throughout my whole life. And to me, it felt very normal. And when we went down to Westmead Children's Hospital annually, I would be in the Starlight room and I'd be amongst a lot of kids in there with a range of disabilities and conditions. And it was normal to me, but I didn't realise until I think in my later years, it kind of might have been where I had this dysfunctional learned coping mechanism of just, I suppose, compartmentalizing things and out of mind, out of sight, out of mind. Yeah. And anyway, so I think I was 16 and I just started feeling a little bit down. And at that age, like back then, that would have been like 2005. So you're full of testosterone, or your mates are full of testosterone, and it's definitely not cool to say, oh, I'm feeling a bit sad, boys, like at that age. And there wasn't even many awareness campaigns. Like there might have been the Lifeline ad on TV or something, but that was it. There wasn't the Beyond Blue and stuff, or if it was, it wasn't advertised well. There was no Movember and no Living. And at that stage, I'd never heard of anyone who had been depressed. No one in my family. My mum hadn't talked to me about it. My dad definitely would never have talked to me about it. None of my mates had ever talked about it, nor had I seen them kind of showing any of the things that I was feeling. And yeah, it's pretty bizarre. It crept up kind of like at first, I think it was an inability to enjoy the things that I had been enjoying up until that age. Like I was very active, always at the beach and surfing and playing footy, golf, nippers, cricket, like every sport I was into it. And just slowly I started withdrawing and losing motivation from that, and found myself creating excuses not to hang out with the boys as much. And then I started getting intrusive thoughts a lot, and just like I've always been a neurotic person, but then I started, stressing about the silliest things, and mum and dad getting sick or Carly getting sick, and eventually it developed into a very severe depression. And the only way that I can describe it, and it's been really consistent throughout my whole life, is it starts off just like there's a little cloud following me and I can feel it coming on, and it's kind of like always over my shoulder. Can't outrun it. I've tried that too. And then eventually it's like you fall into a well, and at the start, the top of the well's not too far away from you, but as the depression grows and the thoughts start snowballing and it sucks the positive life out of you, it's just like you're sinking deeper and deeper into this well, and the light at the surface is getting further and further away until you just feel like you're surrounded in darkness. And that darkness to me is my own mind, because I just get so introverted and so locked up in my mind. I could be in the most crowded place in the world and I would feel like I was the only person there, locked away with my thoughts. And it's almost like in that well, in the darkness, there's just like all this negative inner monologue chatting like the most shit, depressing thoughts at you. You can almost see them swirling around you, and eventually you just go numb. That's my rock bottom, is I get to a stage where I'm just numb and almost unaware of what's going on around me. But as I was saying, at that age, it was untalked about, it's uncool. that age, and so I think I wasn't a natural extrovert, as surprising as that may be to some people. But I think as another coping mechanism and to hide it, so people wouldn't catch on, I developed this bloody charisma about me and become almost very loud and overcompensated and a very like a larrikin. And I felt like the louder I was and the more out there I was, the less people might catch on to what was going on in my head, which was very important to me at that stage. And I remember, I think the first person I talked to about was Mum. And then she had said, she didn't mention depression, but she was just like, yeah, like that's normal. Like people go through these things. And
how old were you then when you spoke to her?
16.
Yeah.
Like this was over a period of probably 3 months. I just sank deeper and deeper, and this was my first experience with it, so I had no idea what was going on.
From when it started to when you spoke to Mum was about 3 months?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
And then I remember at dinner one night, she called Dad in and said, "Oh, Dad, like, have you been through this?" He's like, "Oh yeah, of course. Everyone goes through those periods." And he said, "Mate, just think about bloody the kids out there with cancer." I was just like, "What?" He goes, "You could have it so much worse. Think about how lucky you are." And I'm a very empathetic person. I start thinking about kids with cancer. Not a good thing. So I started, and that didn't work. And the next morning, I think it was, I woke up and Mum was like, "On your way to school today, I just want you to look around you, look how lucky you are to live where you do, smell the trees, buddy." Then I think she was trying to ground me from like being so locked in my head and unaware of the world around me. She was trying to just bring me back to being present. But that didn't work either. And I had a chat to one of my mates at school and I was like, "Oh, fuck, like, have you ever had a period of feeling like this?" And he was just like, "Oh, nah, sorry, man." I was like, "Yeah, no, that's all good." And I remember I would just, like, I'd get to school and it'd feel like, bang, the bell's going, it's time to go home. Like, I just lose whole days of living in my head. And eventually I stopped playing all sports and I'd get home from school and I'd just sit like a zombie watching TV. And
what was it like when you say you lost, like you didn't want to play sports or any of that stuff, or those things that brought you joy didn't anymore? Was it like you're doing the same things but just like those things you used to find fun I was just
like a zombie going through the motions? But then it got to the point where as well, I was so sad all day that my safety net was my family. So I'd get home and I didn't want to leave them. They were the only thing that could distract me from how I was feeling was when I was around Mum and Dad and Carly. And me and Carly weren't actually that close at that stage, and she was pretty brutal to me. But even that was a distraction from how I was feeling. And Mum just telling you all the nice things that mums do, that was a distraction. And then just chatting to Dad, the little chat I got out of him, that was a distraction too. So I used to literally sit at school, and something that I've always used as a coping mechanism when I'm having shit moments is something I'm looking forward to. It could be something massive like an overseas holiday, or literally at that stage it was, I can't wait to get home and watch the 6 o'clock news with Mum and Dad. Like it was, and another massive person actually, which was a huge saving grace. So Mum and Dad worked a lot when I was young and Dad was away often, and my nan lived with me until we were about probably 17 to raise my sister and I. And when I was 17, Carly was 21, and I probably was a few years past needing nan, but I was a bit of a firecracker and did a lot of dumb shit. So Mum, I think nan was a bit of a watchdog, but she was the most supportive person and the most calming person as well. So when I get home from school, I wouldn't want to go out and hang with the boys. I wouldn't want to go to sport or do things because that was taking me away from those supportive networks of people who knew what I was going through and could say the right things that would ease my experience as much as was possible at that stage. But it got to a point where Mum was really worried, and we went to my doctor, and he was really good actually, and he just talked to me about how much more frequent it is than I would think, and how it can affect anyone. It's totally normal, and we're going to get through it.
Is that really comforting to know you weren't the only one?
Huge. Because I honestly felt like I was the first person in the world to experience depression, just because of not knowing anyone and the lack of awareness and campaigns around it back then. That in itself created, like, I was, for a few days, I was like, oh my God, I'm cured. Like
weight off your shoulders a little bit.
The world was a little bit brighter, and I was like, how good is this? But then things started creeping back in. I was like, oh, fuck, here we go. But so straight away they put me on Zoloft, which was a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, or an SSRI, one of the most common antidepressants. And
so what age is this? This is
16 still.
Still 16, yep.
And I also started going to cognitive behavioral therapy. And that was just kind of learning to turn my intrusive thoughts around when I start feeling negative thought processes coming into the frame. Just learning how to stop that process and stop snowballing and snap myself out of it. Some grounding techniques like Mum had tried to, that I found somewhat effective, but I didn't really buy into it enough. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned over the years is with any psychological interventions, you have to believe in it and you have to buy into it, because as I'll go into, like, you can go through the motions and tick boxes and think you're doing all the right things, but at some stage, if you're real with yourself, you can realize pretty quickly that you've spent 6 months or however long investing time into something that you didn't believe in was never going to work. But the Zoloft helped a little bit. I feel like it definitely improved my lows and how low they were, but it also robbed me a little bit of the highs. So it felt just like I was in a bit of a safer flat line. I wasn't super depressed. I wasn't at rock bottom, but I also wasn't the old me that could enjoy the simple things in life, and I couldn't get really excited about some things, but life was a lot better than it had been. And eventually I feel like between 16 and 17, it was a lot better. And I started feeling a lot more like myself. Life got back to normal. And then at 17, I lost a good friend of mine in a car accident. He'd just finished his HSC actually, and I hadn't seen a lot of him because I was in a different friend group, but it was someone I'd grown up with. It was one of Dad's best mate's sons from a young age. Me, him and his two brothers, we hung out a lot. And so he passed away. And so that kind of, again, I felt like through his funeral and everything, and for a while I was just like, I don't know, I didn't process it, and I kind of just, like I did with Carly's CF, just don't think about it. Like, just distract myself. And it's one of the distractions, one of the most dysfunctional coping mechanisms that I have employed, and I still struggle not to employ. When something's too hard to deal with in a moment, don't think about it. Yeah. And it's gotten a lot easier these days because of smartphones, but that's not a blessing as I would like to think. But so I just didn't think about it.
So you need to take the time to deal with it, you think? That would help a lot.
100%. Yeah. And sometimes you're not going to be ready to deal with it, and you might have to put it under the surface or compartmentalize it, but you have to have an intention to deal with it, to gain the resources and the mental faculties that you need to deal with it, because it's going to eat you up inside out subconsciously. And that's what it did. So for a couple of months I was fine, and then I think it was the 23rd of December, because I remember my punishments on Christmas Eve, and I went out with a few friends and ended up just necking a bottle of vodka and getting dropped off by a taxi on the front lawn at 17 years old, just belligerent, spewing on myself, very abusive to Mum. And she has told me this, that when she was like, "What is wrong with you?" I was just went off, and it all came out about Brad passing away that I had been suppressing. And the next day was just kind of like a bit of a numb one. I was hungover as I'd ever been because I drank that bottle of vodka.
That'll do it.
And it was Christmas Eve, and we have a big family Christmas, and I remember Mum just handed me a list, just like, "You got to mow the lawn, do the pergola," and just like put me to work to punish me. But she didn't give me too many big pep talks. And then I realized, like, I have been feeling shit. And then that was probably another 6 month battle I had. I didn't really do anything too different. It just faded away. I didn't go back to see a psychologist or anything. Didn't change medications. Actually, I did. I went from 50 milligrams up to 100 milligrams. And then, from 17 to 18, I was pretty good again, but this is when another dysfunctional trait started. I started partying pretty hard and often, and my Friday to Sundays through year 12 was with the boys a lot, and I wasn't doing certain things to enhance my experience. I was doing certain things to escape my week. My week was when my time to be depressed. My weekend was my time to free myself from that through various means, which caught up to me in the years to come. But also that was at the stage where you start getting a little more active on the dating scene and sexually. And one shit side effect of Zoloft is that you can't ejaculate. So that didn't work for me. I took myself off Zoloft cold turkey, and I was actually pretty good for a little while. Then, for actually a few years, I was pretty good. Just going through the motions, partying and working. I was back playing sport though. I was very functional, very active.
So kind of just went away for a little bit.
I think I learnt to coexist with it.
Okay, yeah.
In a very functional way. I was still very productive, very motivated. At that stage, I was labouring and tiling, and I'd tile all day, and then I would come home, go to the gym, and then after the gym, I'd go to rugby training, things like that. And
so you still had those thoughts and feelings there, but you just kind of learnt to live with them.
Yeah, and I got good at distracting myself. So Monday nights I played OzTag, Tuesday nights was rugby training, Wednesday nights I played touch football, Thursday nights was rugby training, Saturdays was rugby, and Sunday I'd go off and play rep golf. So I think I just tried to stack my schedule full so that I didn't really have time to be depressed. There was always something to look forward to. I was in a very successful footy team at the stage, so there was lots of things to call on for self-efficacy. And but at this stage I was from probably 20 to 23. My partying got more and more out of control to the point where I was probably doing things to very dangerous levels, and my family was very worried about me. And I remember one conversation with my mum, and she was just like, I was going to a music festival actually, and she was just like, I can't keep doing this. Like, if you're going to be in a shit mood for the next week, don't come home. And that was because I'd got into the stage of partying Friday through Sunday most weekends and going to lots of music festivals, and my potion of choice was MDMA. And so I'd go really hard, and that would rob me of every last bit of the little serotonin that I had. And then I'd spend a week recovering those levels, and apparently I was impossible to live with. I was very grumpy, very grouchy, emotionless, insensitive, and looking back I can see that it was really breaking Mum. And I remember Dad sitting me down and just being like, we don't know how to help you. Like, we've never felt more helpless. Even with Carly's CF, we've never felt more helpless. Like with CF, there's been specialists that we could take her to and stuff, but with this, we just don't know what to do and are worried that you're going to end up dead. And
that'd be hard to hear from your loved ones.
It is now, but at that stage, I was kind of numb to everything. And I remember I went on a footy trip away and partied for about 3 days in Brisbane and had very little sleep. And I come home and the soccer boys had won their grand final also, and I ended up turning around and going back to Brisbane. So it turned into about a 5-day bender with some friends. I never stepped foot on the soccer field at Ballina, but and I come home and I'd pushed it too far and I was dead set, like on the verge, I think. And then that was probably a month of just rock bottom numbness. And then I remember breaking down to Mum and just being like, I've been living with this so I was 23 at this stage. So that was 7 years into my experience with depression. And I remember saying to mum, like, because I'd have little recoveries and I'd get depressed and then I'd feel a little bit better and then I'd get depressed and I'd feel better. And it was always in the background, but there was peaks and troughs of it. And I remember saying to mum, and it was something that I'd felt silently for a long time, every time I go through this, even when I recover, I feel like I don't quite get all of me back. I feel like a part of me dies. Every one of these little battles I have, a part of me dies that I don't get back, and eventually there's going to be nothing left of me. And that was when mum was just like, you've got to stop this shit, like what you've been doing. She didn't really know the extent that I'd been partying. She'd just seen the effect it was having on me. And that was when I pulled right away from that scene and lost a couple of friendships that I thought were based on more than just that. And I kind of lived a very quiet life for a while. I ended up going to uni and studying, but then and I actually got a lot better. For a couple of years, I got a lot better.
So it took you hitting that like rock bottom.
Rock bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I realised that I didn't know, when I was partying, I didn't know that I was trying to escape the shit. I thought I was doing what everyone else was doing and just having fun and being young. But my motivation was very different. Mine wasn't to go and have a better time at the festival or a better time out. It was to escape the shitness for however long the party was going to last that week, for that day. And I just was a bit brutally honest with myself and pulled away from that scene. And there was a couple of years that I don't think I did really anything. I might have had a pretty significant drink every now and then with the boys, but definitely not to the standard that I had been up to that point.
And that helped, just getting away from that?
Massively, yeah, definitely. It just created more emotional stability and I was so much more resilient. And my relationships with my family improved a lot. My relationships with my now wife improved a lot. There was more stability there, which had been very rocky and tumultuous up till that stage. And she'd probably borne the brunt of a few of my come downs. Not like physically abusive or anything, but just like there was a few times that I'd party and then I'd come back and I'd just be like, I don't want to be with you. Like I was taking out my internal suffering on her and I'd just be like, I don't want to be with you anymore. And I don't know why she stuck around, but every time she did, and she was a massive rock for me and continues to be. But then we had some family issues and mum and dad went through a really tough time, and I was out surfing one day and I hadn't talked to my dad in about, I don't know, probably close to a year at this stage. And I was out surfing in Ballina and Stace, my wife, come running down the beach and she's waving me in. And I come in, I'm like, what's up? She goes, we've got to go around to your mum's house. I was like, oh, what's happened? She goes, we just got to go around and check on her. And then as we're driving around there, she's telling me that dad had been trying to call me, couldn't get onto me, and was trying to, because he was out of town, and he'd called Stace and said mum had sent him a pretty alarming message. And I had to get around there, and by the time I got around there, mum had OD'd on Valium and sleeping tablets. And she was in and out of consciousness, so we were doing CPR and first aid on her, and Stacey was on the phone to the ambulance, and it was a pretty confronting situation for me. And I honestly thought mum was going to die there in front of me. And by the time the ambulance weren't getting there, and I was super abusive to these poor guys, they'd obviously had a busy day, and by the time they got there, I had mum in my arms running out to the car because I was going to get her to the hospital. And then, yeah, she pulled through, obviously, and she's doing really well now. But that was just instantly numb. And I remember just going back to the old ways of I didn't do it. I just threw myself into my study at uni. I was working casually and part-time. Then Stace would say, do you want to talk about it? Nah, didn't want to talk about it.
Try to distract yourself again.
Distract myself. But under the surface, I think part of me was thinking like, how the fuck could she do that to me? Like, of all the times that through my mental health battles that she just begged me, please don't ever kill yourself. And I'd always promised her I could never do that to her. And then for her to turn around and do that. And we'd been through a bit together at this stage. I think internally felt very betrayed. I and I don't want to portray that suicide's selfish, because I have been in places where I honestly thought that the alternative would be a better option, that my suffering was so bad, my existence was so physically painful. Like, I can't explain the emotional pain so bad that it becomes physical, that the alternative was better. And the only thing that stopped me wasn't guilt of leaving people behind. It was that I was scared that there's nothing after this. And so I was like, that's not better. Like, the idea of going to like something better is better, but the idea of going to nothing isn't better. So literally just a fear of there not being an afterlife is the only thing that stopped me over the years.
I guess that gave you an opportunity as well to see the other side of it, of being the one that was dealing with the mental health issues, but then also being the loved one of someone that was dealing with the mental health issues, seeing the other side of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that's why I don't see suicide as selfish. I see it as just like utter hopelessness and helplessness. And I empathize with people who end up taking that route, because I know the desperation of the situation that they find themselves in. But anyone out there who might be close, all I can say is like, that's a cliche, but it is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. I've been through, I don't know how many battles I've been through with depression now, and I've beaten them all. Even at times where I thought this is the one that's never going to leave, like, you always punch out the other side. And I'm so grateful that I never did end up going that extra step. I'll be honest, I don't know if I've ever told mum and dad this, but I'd even thought about how I would do it and where I would do it and what I would write to the people that I'd leave behind. But yeah, fear stopped me. And now, even though I have an ongoing battle with depression, it's a lot better, and I've definitely got a lot better help. But now I have a little girl, Remy, and I would never ever leave her. So those thoughts don't occur anymore.
I think it's such a common thing that it used to always be growing up as well. I thought the same thing, people that commit suicide, it's selfish. How could they do that to people? And with its education, learning more now, you realise that they're not thinking that.
No.
Like, they don't have that rational thought to think, I'm leaving these people behind and it's selfish. It just gets to that stage and you got no other option.
And one of the biggest emotions I feel when I'm depressed is guilt. And I've seen my mum crying over me and just feeling so helpless and hopeless. And I've seen my attitude when I come back, when I've been depressed or when I've been coming down after a festival, and what I've done to my family. And that adds to it, because you think, fuck, they're going to be better off if I'm not around. Like, you think you're doing them a favor almost. So yes, I'll empathize with both people who have ever, who have taken their life. And I also empathize with their family, because I know that toll it would have taken on my family had I had done it. But so yeah, after the scare with mum, I kind of distanced myself from my family I held them at arm's length for, what was that? I was about 25 then, 24, 25. And I held them at arm's length up until last year when I was 30. So 5 years of, not that I didn't talk to them, just that the relationship was very fragile. I was very resentful, very spiteful, very hurtful at times. I'm a bit of a wordsmith, but to the detriment of those around me, sometimes I can use those to inflict a lot of pain and target people's emotional weak spots with words, which I did a lot over those 5 years. And I just fell back into a state of kind of partying every now and then, and the ebbs and flows of the depression I'd had. Like, I'd have good periods and bad periods, but I always maintain a lot of function, maintain full-time work, played a lot of sport, lived a very active social life. And I think over these years from the outside, I was a lot better. I would have appeared very stable to people who weren't knowledgeable about what I was going through. But then after my daughter Remy was born, I wasn't partying as hard. I wasn't into the party drugs and stuff. And I always made sure that I was a good dad. But what happened as a result of having a kid, as does with a lot of relationships, Stacey and I become each other's second priority. And she had been my rock, and she'd been through so much with me and my confidant and my support more than anyone up until that stage. And all of a sudden I felt like that had gone, and Remy was 2 turning 3, and I kind of just imploded. And Stace reached a point. She's a super resilient person. She's so strong, so loving and so caring, but she reached a point where I was sucking the life out of her. I was very critical. I didn't realize how critical I was, but everything she did was never good enough. And it reached the point where she felt like she couldn't make me happy, and I wasn't making her happy anymore. And we ended up separating for a period of time. And that was when, funnily enough, through that hard time, I reconnected with my mum and dad. And like in my whole life, I think Dad's told me he loved me twice. And I always used to say, like, I don't even know if he loves me, but more than ever in that time, like, Mum and Dad were so amazing. I ended up moving back down to Ballina for a little while. And that was my rock bottom. I thought many times, this is my rock bottom, this is my rock bottom, this is my rock bottom. But last year, that was my rock bottom. And there was a lot of times where it was the darkest places I have been in. And that's when I realized as well, as I touched on before, I had seen psychologists, and when Stacey, leading up to that, had kind of said, like, you need to get help, I was seeing a psychologist and I was doing all these little exercises and stuff, but I hadn't bought in. I didn't believe in it. In my mind, people shouldn't have been triggering me. It wasn't that I was overreacting. It wasn't that I was hard to live with. It was that people weren't up to my standard, and once they're up to my standard, I wouldn't be that much of a prick. And so when she finally, that person that I thought was always going to be there and that would weather any storm with me, once she left, I was like, holy shit, what have I done? And I was really helpless for a little while. And one of my good mates, Fitz, came around one day, and he'd been going through his own significant mental health issues at this stage. And he just looked at me and he said, what the fuck are you doing? Get up off the floor. Who are you waiting for to come help you? And at this stage, it'd probably been 2 months of me just being helpless and massive victim complex. And he's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, get off the floor, get over it. You were shit. Stace is gone. Time to move on and find whatever happiness looks like for you in the future. And it was such a light bulb moment. And I was like, yep. And instantly I just had all this accountability, and I had realized that above all else, I had been very complacent with my mental health, and I had let myself believe that I was doing a lot of work, when in reality, none of my fundamentals had changed. My thought process hadn't changed. My resilience hadn't changed. I was better at faking it at times, but under the surface, I was still a miserable prick, and I was hard to be around. And that's when I started seeing a psychologist very regularly, a psychologist that I related to a lot better, and started doing exercises that I believed in, and I could see the changes in me. And it was really bizarre. My medications hadn't changed, but this is going to sound so weird, I was seeing colours in the world that I hadn't seen since I was 15. Like, it was like the world had been a little bit, my eyes had a filter on, and everything was just a little bit grayscale since I was 16, and even my best times still weren't that bright. But all of a sudden, it was like, oh my God, like, the world's so good. I was loving the little things in life. I was appreciative for my health, for my family's health, and it was just insane.
That's when you really bought in, and I
bought in, yeah, 100%. I wanted to be better for myself and for those around me, and it didn't matter what it took. I was going to achieve it. So I think it took me about 3 psychologists to get to one that I trusted enough and found helped. But the positives out of that were my relationship with my parents has never been stronger. And one thing that really broke me was my mum. I was down at Mum and Dad's, and we were having dinner. I was having a beer with Dad, and Mum just started bawling. And I was like, what's going on? And she said to me, like, I feel like I've got my son back for the first time since you were 16. She goes, she's lost so many hours of sleep, and because she still at that stage thought Carly was going to live a shortened life. And she said, I was always her security blanket, that even once Carly's gone, she's still going to have me. And she goes, since I was 16, she lost that. She felt like when Carly goes, I don't have anyone. Like, you're there physically, but you're not, I don't have a relationship with you as a son. You're not that emotional support that I would want a child to be when Carly goes. And she goes, for the first time since you were 16, I feel like I've got my son back. Like, I know you and I can rely on you, and I feel like you love me. And that was just like, holy shit. Like, how the fuck have I done this to my family for 14 years, 15 years?
That would have been massive for you, though, to know that work that you have put in, and the fact you did buy in has had this payoff in the end, that you have got out the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. And it come to an acceptance, and I don't know, Stacey saw something in me during that break, and she, after months of me trying and her not wanting to admit that she wanted to try, she luckily did agree to give her and I another go. And we then found a good psychologist that helped us reconnect and fix a lot of the damage that I had caused with my mental health. And which was good, because even as a couple, we had been seeing a psychologist leading up to the separation. Neither of us bought in, so it didn't work. And just reiterating, like, you have to want to change, and you have to believe in it. Faking it does not get you anywhere in the long run. And then this last 12 months has still been challenging. Like, we've had bloody COVID and lots of up and down battles still with Stace and I and my mental health, but I feel like I have learned a lot of techniques now that make me more resilient. And I just feel like letting go of so much anger that I had and resent over silly stuff like Dad never telling me he loved me and stuff, and all these immature ideologies I had and that I was holding resent for, things that happened with Mum and Dad, and Mum doing what she did and feeling betrayed from that. I had a backpack since I was born. I had a backpack, and I put these little experiences into that backpack, and I never let anyone forget about it.
It just got heavier the more you put in there.
It got heavier, and the heavier it got, the more pissed off I got, because I was carrying this heavy backpack, and the more I took it out on people around me. And it was like that moment that Fitz was just like, get the fuck up. And I kind of thought, I'd started journaling, and it was like someone cut the straps of the backpack off me, and all of a sudden, like, boom, I was lighter, and I was so much more tolerant, and the world got brighter, and it was just, yeah. And admittedly, I'm still on SSRIs, and I think my doctor and I think that I will be for the rest of my life. Like, my brain chemistry, just for whatever reason, cannot sustain levels of serotonin that allow me to live a happy life without SSRIs, and that's fine too. Like, there's a lot of stigma around those, and people don't like relying on them, but I've lived without them, and I've seen the other side, and like, every day of the week I'll take this option over those.
Still a day-to-day battle for you now? Or?
Probably not even day-to-day at the moment. Like, I have my down times, but I hold myself accountable, and I have much better ability to detect red flags and thought processes and stuff earlier. I love journaling, and I feel like that helps me to let go of things, but also my work. Like, I'm so lucky to work where I do and to work with people like yourself, and just the gratitude I get now out of my health and my family's health is massive. And I think the biggest thing was just letting go of the anger I held on to for those years, and buying in. Like, I cannot stress enough the difference it makes when you actually believe that this person can help you and you wanting to help yourself. I think for a while I actually almost started enjoying being, Jack's depressed again, and like having mum and dad's concern and Stacey's concern. It almost gets addictive. Like you enjoy people worrying about you. And so when I realized that as well, all these little behavioral patterns that I started recognizing once you let go of, with the help from a good psychologist, and once you want to buy in, that the change is so sudden and so significant. And these days, I talk to so many people. Like, there's very few people out there that I know that don't battle with it or haven't battled with it. Like, you're one in a diamond dozen. And that's really comforting as well. And I'm so grateful that kids today have that support and that removal of the stigma around mental health, because at 16 so isolated. I honestly felt like I was the only person in the world going through it. So I'm so glad there's awesome initiatives now, Living and Movember and all the hashtags that ain't weak to speak, etc. It's awesome, because the more we do it, the less young lives that we're going to lose to it, because it's such a, again, I don't want to shame anyone who's done it, but it is such a waste of life. Literally, out of the billions of years that the universe has existed, if we're lucky, what do we get? 70, 80 years. Yeah, like that. So then to not throw it away, but then to pass on this opportunity to experience life, even like our worst day of life is 100% better than not living that day. And what it does, you go to sleep, you wake up with an opportunity for the next day to be better. Whereas if you take that step and you do take your life, that opportunity is gone. There's no coming back from that. And even if it took 5 years to get better, a 5-year recovery process, there's so many years on the other side of that. And hopefully no one does suffer for that long. But yeah, I just can't stress. Stick around. Like, there's so much to be grateful for, and there's so much help out there. Even if you've tried 100 avenues, the 101st avenue that you try might be the one that works and gives you that opportunity to live an enjoyable life again. So just never giving up hope, buying in, holding yourself accountable, and being honest with yourself is so important.
Such an important thing to spread. As we said, it's so prevalent these days and so often goes unspoken about. So I guess for you to be able to come on and share your story and share your battles, it could not have been easy to talk about all that. So
yeah,
I think to come on and do that, hopefully, I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people and could encourage them to get out and get the help they do, and even some of the techniques you've spoken about, maybe they can try to implement that. And like so many important messages. So I mean, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing that, because like I said, it couldn't have been easy. So that positive message we're trying to spread, so it definitely would have resonated with a lot of people and helped some people out there, I think.
Hope so. I'm not going to sit here and preach, but I've tried a few of the dysfunctional popular ways of running away from problems, and they only dug my hole deeper. So just hold yourself accountable, be honest of why you're doing certain things, and try and have a bit of foresight about where they might lead, because very often it's probably not even as good a place as where you're at when you're doing it. But another thing is it's an ongoing battle, and I accept that I'm probably going to have battles in front of me, but with the tools that I've learned now, that I believe in, the therapy that I've received and the psychs work with me, I'm confident that I can overcome it. And I've overcome tens of battles with depression until now. Not one of them have defeated me yet. So 9 out of 10 days these days are really good. 1 out of 10 days really bad. And hopefully in the future that becomes even less frequent. But yeah, reach out, look for any changes in behavior with your friends, and if you think someone's going through it and they're not talking to you about it, just have a chat. Don't be abrasive or invasive about it, but just try and let them know that when they're ready to talk to you, that you're going to be open-minded and not judgmental, and that you're going to be there to help them, whatever that looks like, whether it's for 6 months, my mum slept bloody next to my bed, so I didn't have to sleep in my room alone because I was and that was at 16. Like, there's so many little ways, but even if it's just lending an ear and letting someone vent, just try and be that person. You literally could be the difference of keeping someone in this world. So take that time and help a mate out.
Because that's something I have sometimes wondered, being someone that hasn't struggled that much with mental health, reaching out to someone that maybe has. What do you need? Do you just say, talk to me? Do you say, just go get a coffee and not actually talk about the mental health? Or do you want to talk about your mental health with them?
I'm pretty open these days. So like last year when Stace and I separated and we were going through a rough time, I sent, like, I'm very close with all my work colleagues and I knew a lot of them would want to reach out to me, but I just sent a group text just saying, look, I'm not ready to talk about this. I need some time. I'm going home to be around family. When I'm ready, I'll reach out to you. And a few of them, whether it was out of concern or whatever, were a little abrasive and invasive, and it was negative for me. So I think the biggest thing you can do to not force someone to speak is just say, look, I don't know what you're going through at the moment, but I just want you to know when you're ready, or if you're ever ready, like, whatever you need from me, I'm willing to be there for you, whatever that looks like. If you don't want to, that's fine, as long as I know you're okay. But just let them know that if they're ready, you're ready to be there for them.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, that's something I've always wondered. You want to be there for people, and you do care about people, but if you don't understand what they're going through, that understanding how to be there for them is something tricky. So hopefully that other people had that same question that I had, and that can help people reach out.
Absolutely. I hope it hasn't been too heavy for anyone listening. Yeah, it's just a really good message, and we've lost too many young lives to it. So the time has come to act, remove the stigma once and for all completely, and help people to get the help they need. One of our heavier chats today with some pretty confronting issues, guys. Sorry about that. If any of the topics today or any of our podcasts along the way do bring up negative emotions for you and you feel like you might need help, Beyond Blue have given us the green light to offer their support. So please contact them on 1300 224 636, or go online to beyondblue.org.au and follow their website to the online chat. Don't forget to check in on each other, and remember, it ain't ever weak to speak.
Such an important message, especially with what we've spoken about in today's episode. So please do reach out if you need, as Jack said. And we hope you got a lot from this episode, but now we look forward to our next one. And we have coming in Katie Kelly, who is an Order of Australian recipient and Paralympic gold medalist who has a degenerative disease known as Usher syndrome. Usher syndrome is a genetic condition. It causes vision and hearing impairment, but this didn't stop Katie winning gold in Rio in the triathlon. So her and her sister, Bridget, will also be coming in, who was a big part of Katie's life growing up and has helped her through with a lot of her hearing loss in her early years, as we'll hear much about. So looking forward to getting them on. So if you have any questions you think we should ask them, feel free to reach out to us on our social media pages on Instagram, the unaffected_podcast, our email address, theunaffectedpod@gmail.com, or on Facebook, just the Unaffected Podcast. We have links to our YouTube, our TikTok, and all our other socials on our Instagram and Facebook pages, so reach out that way, and hopefully you come back and listen to Katie's episode. So thank you.